Lieutenant Dominic Rhodes stood at the edge of the research outpost's observation deck, watching the magnetic storms paint the sky in shades of green and purple. 6 months into the Kepler 742 terraforming initiative, and the planet still found ways to surprise him. The swirling colors reminded him of the northern lights back on Earth, except these could strip the paint off a shuttle at 30,000 feet. "Atmospheric readings are getting weird again, sir," called out technical specialist Jasmine Wong from her monitoring station. Her dark eyes narrowed at the readout scrolling across her screen. "The magnetic interference is playing havoc with our sensors." Dominic nodded, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. At 43, he was older than most lieutenants in the Planetary Exploration Corps, PEC, having transferred from the civilian sector after a decade in geological engineering. "How long until the next window?" "Storm should pass in about 6 hours, Jasmine replied, tapping through projected weather patterns. "But that's not what's bothering me. Look at these resonance patterns." Dominic crossed to her station, studying the oscillating waves on the display. They didn't match any of the standard atmospheric phenomena they documented so far. "Could be equipment malfunction from the interference. I ran 3 diagnostic cycles. Equipment's fine." Jasmine pulled up a comparison chart. "These patterns, they're too regular. Almost like something's generating them," Dominic finished, feeling a familiar tingle of discovery at the base of his skull. "Pack up the portable scanner. We're going to check it out." "Sir, protocol states." "Protocol also states we investigate any anomalies that could impact terraforming operations." He was already heading for the equipment locker. "Besides, the storm's moving away from that sector. We'll be fine." 20 minutes later, they were suited up in their environmental gear, trudging across the rocky terrain in their rover. Kepler 742's violet sun cast long shadows across the crystalline formations that dotted the landscape like glass sculptures. The planet's unique mineral composition created natural structures that seemed to defy physics, towers of transparent crystal that spiraled up from the ground like frozen waterfalls. "Signals getting stronger," Jasmine reported from the passenger seat, her voice slightly distorted through the suit's comm system. "Whatever it is, it's about 2 kilometers ahead, near the Fissure Ravine." The Fissure Ravine was one of their primary study sites, a deep crack in the planet's crust that extended for kilometers, filled with some of the most unusual mineral formations they'd yet discovered. As they approached, the rover's external sensors began picking up increased electromagnetic activity. "Power readings are off the charts," Jasmine muttered. "But I'm not seeing any heat signatures that would indicate volcanic activity." Dominic brought the rover to a stop about 100 meters from the ravine's edge. The magnetic storm painted the sky above them in curtains of light, but something was different about the illumination here. The crystal formations seemed to be, responding to it, pulsing with their own inner light. "Are you seeing this?" he breathed, watching as ripples of bioluminescence ran through the structures like blood through veins. "Impossible," Jasmine whispered. "These formations are supposed to be inert. Unless they weren't just formations at all." A sound like singing glass filled their comms, a pure, crystalline note that made the hair on the back of Dominic's neck stand up. One of the larger structures near the ravine's edge was changing, its surface flowing like liquid mercury despite its crystalline nature. As they watched, it began to take shape, forming what looked like a delicate latticework of light and crystal. "Sir," Jasmine's voice was tight with tension. "We should call this in." But Dominic was already moving, drawn forward by a curiosity he couldn't explain. The crystalline entity, there was no other word for it, continued to reshape itself, forming what appeared to be appendages, a torso, a head-like structure that swiveled toward him with faceted surfaces that caught and reflected the storm's light. It was beautiful. Terrifying. Impossible. And it was trapped. Now that he was closer, Dominic could see that part of the entity's lower structure was embedded in a pool of dark liquid, runoff from their terraforming operations that had collected in a natural depression. The liquid was highly acidic, designed to break down certain mineral compounds to make the soil more Earth-like. The entity's crystalline surface was already showing signs of degradation where it contacted the fluid. The singing note in their comms had taken on a discordant quality that somehow conveyed distress. "Lieutenant Rhodes," Jasmine called out, her voice sharp with warning. "Protocol explicitly forbids." "Grab the neutralizing agent from the rover," Dominic cut her off, already reaching for his utility belt. "And the sample collection tubes." "Sir, we don't know what that thing is." "I know it's in pain," he replied, removing a length of carbon fiber cable from his belt. "And I know we caused it." "That's enough for now." Working quickly but carefully, Dominic secured the cable around a nearby rock formation. The entity watched him work, its crystalline form pulsing with waves of soft blue light. He couldn't shake the feeling that it was studying him just as intently as he was studying it. When Jasmine returned with the supplies, they worked together to neutralize the acid pool, then created a makeshift ramp using their sample collection equipment. The entity seemed to understand their intentions, coordinating its movements with their efforts until, with a sound like wind through crystal, it pulled free of the degraded section. For a moment it towered over them, easily 3 meters tall, its form constantly shifting between solid geometric patterns and flowing liquid crystal. Then, to their amazement, it began to shrink, condensing itself down until it was roughly human-sized. The singing in their comms changed pitch, becoming something that reminded Dominic of the wind chimes his mother used to hang on their porch back in Colorado. The entity extended one of its appendages toward him, the crystal surface flowing and reshaping until it had formed a perfect replica of his gloved hand. Slowly, carefully, Dominic reached out and touched his palm to its crystalline mirror. A jolt of energy ran through his suit's systems, and for just a moment, he felt connection. Understanding. Gratitude. Then the entity withdrew, its form flowing back into something more alien. With movements that seemed almost ceremonial, it broke off a small piece of itself, a perfect dodecahedron that glowed with its own inner light, and placed it in Dominic's hand. Before either human could react, the entity had flowed back to the ravine's edge and disappeared over it, leaving behind only the fading echo of its crystalline song in their comms. Jasmine was the first to break the silence. "So, I guess the preliminary assessment of no intelligent life was a bit premature." Dominic looked down at the crystal in his hand, watching as patterns of light chased themselves through its faceted surface. "I'd say that's a fair assumption." He carefully secured the crystal in a sample container. "The question is, what do we do now? Protocol says we should report it immediately and suspend all terraforming operations pending a full xenobiological review. And if they decide this species is incompatible with terraforming? If they decide to abandon the project and leave them alone?" Jasmine was quiet for a moment. "Would that be so bad?" "No," Dominic admitted. "But I don't think that's what they want." "Did you feel it? When it touched my hand? It wasn't afraid of us. It was curious. Like it's been watching us this whole time, trying to understand." The storm above them was beginning to fade, the curtains of light dissolving into the violet sky. But new lights were appearing along the ravine's edge, dozens of crystalline structures beginning to pulse with their own inner glow. "Sir." Jasmine's voice had gone tight again. "I don't think your friend is alone." Dominic smiled behind his faceplate. "No," he said softly. "I don't think it ever was." The crystal in its container pulsed once, bright and clear, like a beacon answering distant stars. And in their comms, ever so faintly, they could hear the first notes of a new song beginning. 3 days after the encounter at Fisher Ravine, Dominic hadn't slept more than a few hours. The crystalline fragment pulsed steadily in its containment unit, synchronized with the increasingly strange readings from their monitoring equipment. He and Jasmine had kept the discovery to themselves, documenting everything while trying to make sense of it. "The resonance patterns are evolving," Jasmine announced, her fingers dancing across multiple holographic displays. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she'd been sleeping as little as he had. "They're forming complex mathematical sequences now. Look at this." Dominic leaned over her shoulder, watching as strings of numbers scrolled across the screen. Are they trying to communicate? I think they already are. She pulled up a comparative analysis. These patterns match the frequencies we use for terraforming operations, but they're improving them. It's like they're showing us a more efficient way to modify the atmosphere. Before Dominic could respond, the outpost's proximity alerts began chiming. The crystalline fragment in its container flared brilliantly, filling the room with prismatic light. Multiple contacts approaching from the ravine, Jasmine reported, switching to external cameras. And sir, they're not trying to hide. The sight took Dominic's breath away. Dozens of crystalline entities flowed across the terrain like living mercury, their forms shifting between geometric precision and liquid grace. Leading them was a larger being that Dominic somehow knew was the one he'd helped rescue. Its pattern of light pulses was unmistakable. They're forming something, Jasmine whispered, zooming in the camera.